Welcome to another episode of Beyond Perception, where it's all about breaking out of limited understanding of oneself, of life, and wake up to freedom, in all aspects. I'm Simon Rilling, and my guest today is Nathan Martin again. A couple of days, we just recorded an epic episode where Nathan introduced us to the trivium and empathetic reasoning. And if you haven't, you should definitely give it a listen. It's packed with valuable information, input on how to think. And as Nathan proposes, and I totally agree, this is really the key to self-empowerment. And for those who haven't listened to the conversation, at a brief intro about Nathan again, he co-created an integrative methodology called the Unity process, which combines philosophy of natural law, which we will talk about today, trivium method, which we talked in the last episode, Socratic questioning, Jungian shadow work, and Meridian tapping. They combine that into an easy-to-use system that allows people to process their emotional upsets, work through trauma, correct poor thinking. Last session, checked it out, discover meaning, and set healthy boundaries, which is also, from what I understand, we will talk today about, refine viewpoints, and to achieve a positive focus. So I'm really humbled, and thank you again for being here. Welcome, Nathan.
It's really great to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Yeah, today we will talk about natural law, setting boundaries, and I can imagine that because also I never heard about natural law. Last year, I think it was September, it was the first time I was introduced to natural law. It was really interesting, and for me, it changed the way I look at life. And I was quite surprised that something that profound was basically hidden to me for like so long, and I had no clue about that exists, what it is. And for those who've never heard about it, like, Nathan, like, what would you say? What is natural law?
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to give a disclaimer before we start that I'm not giving legal advice or law advice in any way, shape, or form. What I am doing is giving psychological and spiritual advice. And this advice is in a different jurisdiction than man-made courts and man-made laws. So this is not for the man-made stuff. This is for well beyond that. When it comes to natural law, it's about objective and universal truths. It's about property rights and objective morality based in reason. So you can know what the laws are through understanding, through, like in the last episode, we talked about understanding the importance of logic and reason and empathy, and how empathy is also connected to that. We need to be reasonable. We need to learn how to be reasonable. And being a reasonable person has to do with the law of reason, natural law. So John Locke actually is one of the forerunners of the philosophy of natural law. He wrote some really great stuff in On Government 1 and 2, or his treatises on government. I highly suggest that as reading if you really want to get into the know with what the law of reason really is and what natural law really is. And he wrote that as a comeback to what's known as the divine right of kings. And the divine right of kings to rule, they said that they had the right to rule everybody because everybody is children. They are Adam and Eve. They come from the line of Adam, and Adam had the right to rule over his children. Therefore, they have the right to rule over people. Well, in a way, that's right. They have the right to rule over the children. When somebody is a child, intellectually, emotionally, etc., they don't have an internal king. They will have an external king. So he made the case that we need to basically have this, the internal king. We have to align ourselves with the law of reason, become reasonable people. That is through gaining understanding, and in fact train our children in that. So our children are subject to us under natural law. They are our property because natural law has to do with property rights. children are our property until they reach the age of reason. The age of reason is when they have internalized logic, and they are now able to they've set themselves apart from animals because they have become reasonable. But if somebody never becomes, reasonable, they never align themselves with the law of reason, then they can be ruled over because they have no internal king. The king is logic, the logos, Jesus, like we talked about last time. Jesus and reason are synonymous. And if you do not have the internal king, Jesus, in your heart, you will have an external king, and that king will rule over you. So we must align ourselves with the law of reason, with natural law. And the natural law is universal. So another name for it could be called universal law. They are universal principles. You have the 7 hermetic principles, which are a part of natural law. But those are more like laws of physics, mentalism, correspondence, polarity, cause and effect, gender, vibration, and a few others. These are universal principles that we can use. Well, one of those is cause and effect. Cause and effect is the why, causality, understanding. We have to master understanding. That is one of the 7 universal principles, natural laws, also known as the law of attraction. So the biggest piece of property that we can own is ourselves. So yes, there's property rights and private property and personal property, and you can get into all the different types of property, public property. But the one piece of property that we really have to own is us. Because if we don't own us, any property we supposedly own isn't really ours, because we're owned by somebody else, because we don't own ourselves. If we don't own ourselves, we can't own things. So the most prized piece of property you can own is yourself. Self-government, also known as internal monarchy, is aligning one's psychological and mental states with the logos and natural law. And it's necessary to achieve self-government, self-ownership. Without internal monarchy, there is no self-ownership. So that's really the biggest piece of property you can own. Then we can look at nature. Do geese, when they're migrating south for the winter, do they need a passport? Okay. Well, that's kind of that means that passports aren't necessarily natural. They're probably something else. They're a construct. What kind of a construct? They're an agreement. Well, what if you didn't agree to it? Well, there's a whole big line of reasoning why people are stuck in the system. And it's really because we haven't created another system. But there is people now that are traveling with common law passports and other types of passports lawfully without having a government issued passport. And that's because they have taken ownership of themselves. And for anybody that really wants any kind of legal advice and law advice and those kinds of issues, especially where it pertains to common law, the 2 that I am aware of, and I'm sure there's more. I know there's one here in the Netherlands, but Netherlands is not a common law country. But I would say In Power, that's with Cal Washington. And also in Australia, there's Solutions Empowerment. And both of those have really good ways of dealing with the current system to become lawful. And it's a way that works. I know Cal Washington, he sued the Queen of England and won. He's sent in paperwork to various organizations, ministers of different positions, and they retired the very next morning when they got the legal document from him, because he has been able to hold people accountable for their actions. He found the people liable that should be liable, that have been getting away without liability, and he made them liable with a legal contract. And once they saw that, they got out of Dodge. They're like, I quit. I resign immediately. So results. He's had, he doesn't recommend people going to court because that's their jurisdiction. That's the parasite's jurisdiction. But he's had judges run from the courtroom when he comes in. They don't want any part of him. The judge will abandon ship because it's a maritime type thing. They'll abandon ship. They'll leave the ship. They'll leave him in charge.
As it is super interesting, and there are already kind of a lot of possibly also new information to like who's listening this. And basically, like there are a couple of questions from my side. So if you talk of natural law, is that something which is made up, which is just like an internal metaphorical
you
thing,
can divine it
or
use of reason,
or is that like, or is this an inherent mechanism built in this reality?
Yeah.
And if I align myself with it, like I will have a different experience of life, and if I don't, I will, like, the experience will not be the same as when I'm aligned with natural law. Is that like, does that make sense from perspective on
yes.
it?
That's why that natural law is objective.
So it doesn't matter
is-
what I believe or think, I'm subject to it. Everybody's subject to it.
Everybody is subject to it. Yes. Like I know the predators and the parasites and those people. Most of them are aware of it. They call it, the laws of karma. They're trying to find ways to avoid karma. They try, life extension techniques and that kind of thing, because they know that if they die, they have to get reincarnated and go through this whole mess again. And they don't want to get reincarnated, or they don't want to deal with their karma. They don't want to deal with the consequences of the things that they've done. They don't want to learn their lessons, and they want to bypass it. And so they find ways of getting other people to take liability and responsibility. I mean, so everybody who goes along with their agendas is they're the ones taking liability and responsibility. They're the ones taking the consequences.
So when I understand, like, or what I understand, there are principles, there is natural law, one is cause and effect. So every action I have has consequences, and basically that's karma. That, like, whatever I do,
karma,
it comes back to me. And
it comes back to you because it's a part of you. You caused it, therefore it comes from you. Like, I mean, we are responsible for our causes. And if we don't want to be responsible for our causes, we're trying to get around it. And we're trying to make other people responsible for our causes. It's just a law of the universe. I mean, cause and effect happens. And it's not something like you're going to be born as a cow next life. That's kind of like that's like an Eastern kind of translation. This is just, if I kick a can, the can skips down the road. Cause and effect. I caused that can to go down. Now, if I kick the can and it hits somebody's windshield and causes them to swerve and hit a child, like, I helped cause that.
Yeah. And you mentioned before common law, and like, how does natural law fit in? Is there a hierarchy of law, and what law are we subject to in our society? Like, are we all living? But, like, as I said, like, for me, natural law was the first time last year that I heard about it. So my assumption was, or it was pretty obvious, that I have not been living in aligned with natural law, let's call it that way, because I didn't know about it. And like, how do you, if you could describe it, how does natural law fit into a hierarchy, and also what do we have in our society as a law?
There's jurisdictions. So there's lots of different types of jurisdictions, and they're interconnected, but a lot of people don't realize the connections that they have. So at the very foundation, you have natural law. Natural law is universal. It is inherent. It is, it goes from, it's all planets, all worlds, the universe, it's universal. Then you have, things that are here, like you have the law of the sea, maritime law, also known as commercial law. Commercial law, maritime law are synonymous. In fact, Roman law stems from the law of the sea. So any Roman law countries, such as Holland and the Netherlands, most of Europe, they're based in the law of the sea, Roman law. That's commercial law. So commerce, it's subjective. So in statute law, a group of people come together, they make a law, and now everybody is subject to that law, right? So they vote on it. They say now everybody is subject to this law, and then people protest against it or not, or whatever. It's other people making laws for you. And they're subjective. They're just based on what these people decided to do. Purely subjective. There's no basis and reason besides rationalizations. Then you have, because actually, let's go back to natural law. In natural law, if there's no, and also common law, actually, if there's no victim, there's no crime. Without a victim, there's no crime. So, if you're not wearing your mask in public, you're not paying taxes, who's the victim that you didn't pay taxes? There's no victim. There's no victim because you decided not to wear a mask. You could say, well, but we're going to prove that you transmitted this disease, for a disease that was never even isolated? How are you going to prove that? So there has to be a victim. It's an objective victim. This person was murdered. This person had their property damaged, vandalized. This person had their property stolen. Actually, taxes is stealing. It's, because there's no consent. It's involuntary. Now, voluntary taxes, that's another thing. All taxation should be voluntary. Involuntary, though, well, what happens with involuntary? You're taking their stuff away from them. You're stealing money.
So
that's actually a violation of natural law. The government is violating natural law to do taxes, because there is an objective victim, and that is the person that is being forced to pay taxes.
So that implies that we have free choice about what we want to do, as long as we don't cause any harm to someone else. Is that also related to natural law? That what are the rights we have? if you could enlighten us, because you mentioned before right of property or right of travel. What are rights we have?
Well, we have the right to direct our lives. That's really the big thing. So we'll talk about a few other rights, but I have the right. There's negative rights. There's positive rights. Positive rights are basically done by government, and they give you privileges. You pay taxes, you get these privileges. It's like driver's license. You have the privilege to drive when you have a driver's license, but if you don't have a driver's license, you don't have that. So when a socialist says, "I have the right to healthcare," what they're saying is you have to give me something. I have to violate your negative rights in order for me to get this positive right. So I have to force you to give me free healthcare and to pay for that healthcare, and the doctor to provide that healthcare so that I can have it. So that's a positive right. Negative right says just stay away from it. I have the right to not be interfered with. It's non-interference. So if you look at the prime directive in Star Trek, non-interference, I have the right to not be interfered with. It's my natural right to not be interfered with. I can travel where I want. You can't tell me where I can't go. I mean, I can't obviously go on private property. I can't go on your property and just, walk into your house. I don't have the right to walk into your house because my rights and where your rights are. But I can travel freely. I have the right to travel freely. I have the right not to have my stuff stolen. I have the right to, if you invite me to Switzerland, I have the right to go there without a passport and to visit you based on you inviting me in. Your invite should be enough for me to come there. We have an agreement. Please come visit. Sure, why not? That agreement supersedes. There's no objective, crime being committed if I go over without a passport.
Does that also include freedom of speech?
Well, yes. I mean, there's
free will.
The Bill of Rights details a lot. The freedom to assemble peacefully, the freedom to speak freely, the freedom to defend yourself. That's why guns are illegal in America still. We have the right to defend ourselves. In fact, when we say we have the right to defend ourselves, we should also have access to tanks, to bazookas, to whatever we want. If we're using bazookas on our neighbors, we don't have that right. but we have the right to own it to defend ourselves from government tyranny and from our, any neighbors like China or something that might want to cause us harm. So the right to defend yourself, does an animal have the right to defend himself from, and to run away or to defend himself from another predator? Yes. Therefore, we do. You can observe a lot of the natural rights. Do I have the right to speak freely? Yes, because if I can't speak freely, I can't think freely. If I own myself, I have the right to speak. Now, do I have the right to incite violence against you? No. I can't say, hey, let's everybody should go over to Simon's house and burn his house down. I don't have that right because that's your property.
And so to put that in perspective, that's a bit different to what we know in terms of law. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Like what we introduced you, and you also mentioned something.
Well, America was originally, the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights specifically was pretty much founded upon the writings of John Locke. So the philosopher John Locke. So reading that, you can see, what our rights are and why our rights are as they are. You can get into that philosophy and you can start learning how to align with it. But really, if anybody, you have to develop your character in order to be responsible enough to handle self-government. Because, okay, all these rights, again, go back to property, myself. I have the right to defend my property, myself, my family, me, where I live from harm. That's, Second Amendment. I have the right to speak freely. I have the right to have the freedom of whatever religion I choose. Why? Because it's my property. I get to decide for my property. I get to assemble. I get to write what I want to write, as long as it's not libel. Or, libel is where you write something false about somebody else and ruin their life. Why? Because I'm attacking their property. I can't attack their property, in speech, which is slander, or in writing, which is libel. So again, natural law covers property rights.
And you said before that until we grow up, until we leave childhood, we don't own ourselves. So
right.
we must grow up. We must become adult.
Yes.
And if we own ourselves, that's also something then which is accepted by, let's call it, the current system, and they will grant you your inherent rights.
Grudgingly.
But they have to. They know about that. They are familiar with that universal mechanism. And
there's a papal bull that was written, I forget, 1600s, maybe earlier, maybe a little later. But in the papal bull, it talks about how they have dominion, the Catholic Church and Roman law, because Roman law comes from canon law, and that comes from the law of the sea. They have ownership over all human creatures. But they have a differentiation where they talk about the spiritual man, the spiritual human, the spiritual being, the spiritual man. They do not have any dominion over, because they have perfected themselves. They have aligned themselves with the law of Christ, or whatever, natural law. When Jesus said, the law is written on your heart, he was talking about natural law, logocentrism, the law of reason.
So one of the things which is not clear to me, if free choice, if you don't do any harm, free choice over what you do, is something which is inherent and also known by those who made the current laws. How do they get our permission to not know about those laws? If you know what I mean.
Well, they count on our ignorance, and I'm going to go into this later in my notes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But they do count on our ignorance, and they get what's called tacit consent. So they understand the laws of consent extremely well, and they work things in such a way that they either get our tacit consent or explicit consent. So the people who are like really pro lockdown, they're giving explicit consent. They're just jumping on board with every new rule, and yes, flatten the curve and save lives and stay home, save life, whatever it is. The Corona Karens, as an example. The people who enforce the tax system, all that, they're explicitly consenting. But then you have tacit consent, and tacit consent is where you just don't say no. You just don't do anything about it. You don't like it, but you do it anyways. Well, that's consent. And therefore you're also in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they get around it. And they get around it through ignorance, basically. People are ignorant to these laws, and more so now, because the founding fathers in America, they weren't ignorant to it. They understood it very, very well. They created a very interesting governmental system that had all these checks and balances and protections of natural law. So they are very intimately aware. Common law is basically like the criminal law system, and it's based on tradition, whereas natural law is based on reason. So, but common law has its origins in natural law. Common law is called the law of the land. So it kind of was instituted through the Magna Carta. It traces back to there. So the Magna Carta is a very significant piece of history. And it kind of translated natural law into everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
Through what's called precedents. You set a precedent.
So, like, doesn't make sense to speak in terms of hierarchy? There at the top is natural law, which is inherent,
Mm-hmm.
and then like the first level below, man-made law.
No. Then you would have common law is like a bridge between the subjective and the objective. And you're talking about actual crimes that people don't get prosecuted from natural law. They get prosecuted through common law.
Mm-hmm.
If they commit an objective crime and there's a victim in criminal law, you're using common law, at least in America. And the Constitution is also a bridge, between the civil government and natural law and common law a little bit.
So there are countries which are common law based.
Yes. In fact, but they're all really under attack right now. So New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, England, UK, Canada, and America. Those are the common law countries. And they're all severely under attack because the law of the sea wants to dominate. In Revelation, they call it the beast from the sea.
No, basically all other countries there are subject to the law of the sea, which is below.
Well, except for I think Sharia law countries, and also, but that's like a religious law. And also Israel is a Talmudic law.
I know that you have a lot you want to share today with us. So please, if you want to go on to something else, please go. One of the things though, which interests me a lot. So if I'm living in a country where they have the law of the sea, is like, how can I become an adult? Like, how can I leave the childhood?
First of all, you have to do that within yourself. Mm-hmm. Just because you fill out the paperwork doesn't mean that you are qualified to govern yourself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I know that in the Netherlands, there is groups of people with different formulas, so to speak. And these different formulas for becoming sovereign or whatever, like some are getting back their birth certificate or their birth trust or something like that. Others are doing the sovereign person thing, and from what I understand, each has their drawbacks and each has their strong points. But they also have passports and stuff like that they can issue, and they're able to travel through that. I don't know how you would do it, but I know like in the Netherlands, which is a Roman law country, there is a lot still. There is enough for people to get their stuff back. They can either but connecting into natural law doesn't work. Like, natural law is not recognized by these man-made courts. It's best to navigate using their system and using their system against them, because they count on our ignorance of their system. So you can spiritually connect into natural law. It can sustain you and align with you. And then, because you are aligned with cause and effect, and you are cause in the world, now everybody around you is not going to be able to mess with you. So you're able to stand in your power. And I'll give some examples of that later on. What's called instant karma and stuff. But you still have to find a way to ground. You have to find your in to get back into the system, because you still have to ground through a system of law. But the system of law, actually, that is really pretty much taken over the whole world and runs the whole world. Even though the common law countries are under attack, and they feign or they claim they're common law countries, they've already been infiltrated, and they're being run by what's called lex mercatoria. And lex mercatoria is a type of commercial law of the sea that goes back thousands of years, back to the Phoenicians, I believe, maybe even before them. And it's based in commerce. So the courts are all pretty much running as lex mercatoria without telling people that it's lex mercatoria. But if you learn the laws of lex mercatoria, or the rules of how lex mercatoria works, you can use that system to your advantage. That's what Cal Washington has done of Empower. And that's also what the Solutions Empowerment people in Australia have done. They've harnessed how to use lex mercatoria in a way that helps somebody to live a sovereign life.
Okay, so basically by knowing how it works, or how they ask for your unconscious acceptance or permission, like when you know how they do it, you basically can withdraw the consent.
And I'm going to explain how to do that.
Okay.
So when we can align ourselves with natural law, we can kind of go beyond all of this. So commercial law is about subjective agreements. You and me, we're going to do a transaction. One of the commerce, between interstate commerce, at least according to American Law Dictionary, is called intercourse. Intercourse is sex, as we know. Intercourse is a form of commerce. So it's good to understand that relationships are the microcosm, while financial transactions are the macrocosm. So if you can learn how to implement these rules and these laws and these agreements in your microcosmic relationships, you can then expand them into the macrocosmic business world and legal world. That's what I've done. That's why we're going to be talking about personal boundaries and how to set boundaries, because everybody wants to focus on the external world and the laws and the courts and all these kinds of things, but they're not focusing on themselves, their own personal development, and how they interact with their family, their friends, their loved ones,
or even with themselves. And that
yes.
Now the law of mentalism comes back to me. That
right
makes perfectly sense, that we're creating by our thoughts our reality, and if we're not in a position where we can navigate ourselves, we have no chance to navigate the outside.
Exactly. So we have to really, the only way out is in.
Makes a lot of sense.
Oh, I have a neighbor listening to music really loud.
I don't hear it.
Okay, good.
Good music, yeah.
It's kind of happy music, yeah. So commercial law is about subjective agreements, and as a natural right, we have the right to negotiate and renegotiate the terms of our agreements. So if you and I are going to go into agreement, we have an agreement to do this podcast together. We made this agreement. I consented to be on your show. You didn't coerce me to be on the show. There was no gunpoint, no threats of jail. I'm here by my own explicit consent. So we made an agreement. That being said, we also have the right to renegotiate the terms of our agreements. So down the road, let's say we became partners and we were doing a bunch of podcasts together. At any time, we could say, you know what, this just isn't working for me anymore. I'd like to find a way to make some money from this, or I would like to move on and do something else because it's no longer exciting me, or whatever it would be. We have the right to renegotiate at any point. Now, it's good to know that you have that right, but it's not like, okay, I'm going to get him to really like me and we're going to do this together. But in a little bit, I'm going to ask for money. And now he's going to be stuck with me because of whatever, So it's not like I'm renegotiating to get one over on you. It's just as we change, our desires change, we can change.
That would, if I remember what you shared with us the last conversation, it is about aligning your thought, emotions, and actions. And if I would have a different thought than what I would share with you, that would also not be very congruent, right?
Right, exactly.
And would that then be in disharmony with natural law?
Yes, of course, because now you're making an agreement, but you're not disclosing the full terms. Like if you're disclosing the full terms as you currently experience it, realizing that things could change.
So basically, if I'm intransparent, if I'm thinking something else, but I'm communicating something which is not really the same, like
right, exactly.
You're have an advantage over you, then I would not be in alignment with natural law, which would have some consequences.
Yes, karmic consequences at the least, and it would eventually show. Blasphemy is when our subjective preferences, which are the jurisdiction of agreements, are held equal to objective truth and natural law. For example, we're going to send people to jail who don't pay taxes. What they've done is they have taken a subjective law statute. You have, mandatory taxes, because actually the victim of taxation is the person being taxed without representation, or, with whatever the, if they don't consent and they're taxed and they're thrown in jail, that means that they've been held to a standard that is not objective. That is blasphemy. Free speech laws, where they're now saying hate speech laws, where they're now saying that free speech isn't acceptable anymore if it's hate speech, and then everything gets categorized as hate speech. You have to call me by a certain pronoun. Boom. No, I don't. Oh, yes, you do. If you don't, you go. Their subjective preference to be called by something. I'm a girl. Can't you tell I'm a girl? Don't I look like a girl with my beard and my deep voice? No, you don't. But you have to call me that, because if you don't, it's hate speech and go to jail. That's blasphemy. That's elevating the subjective up to equality with or superseding objective. It's not reasonable to force somebody to compel speech. That's not reasonable. And so what's happening is it's an inversion. The subjective has become objective. Democracy being called tyranny of the masses, because the masses now get to decide what is, true, what's right. No longer the objective principles of natural law and reason.
Yeah. I think we talked in the last conversation about it, that if you don't have context, if you don't know, like as you're sharing here with us, it's so difficult to spot the inversion.
Right. Yeah, it is difficult, because you're not, you don't understand how the system works, so you can't play the game. So you're playing a game that you're told to play, and it's got ever-changing rules, especially 2020. 2020 was like the year all the rules changed, and that was a changing of the rules, but it was a changing of the subjective rules. And they're changing a bunch of subjective rules. They're superseding objective rules, and they're throwing in a whole new set of subjective rules, and they're gradually going through so as to get everybody's consent. They're just steamrolling. The next day, they just do it again. They just do it again. They just do it again. They keep changing the rule a little bit at a time. They keep, extending things. Now we're in lockdowns. Now we're in, what is it called? Curfew. The truth be damned. It has nothing to do with truth. It has everything to do with generating consent and manufacturing consent.
By causing desperation with the situation, so that people are like, whatever, I do everything to have the situation end.
Right. And they're tricking people, jail time, fines, that kind of stuff. But the key is that they're using fines mostly. Well, we're just going to fine you. We're going to, fine you out of existence, basically. You use our money that we issue. That's a privilege. You have to go to our stores that we give permission to exist. And if you don't, we'll fine them. So they're going to enforce it on you. So basically the matrix just filled with Agent Smiths doing the job of making our lives very difficult.
If we talk about fines, like there again, and like whatever situation, if there is no victim, there is no right to like claim or ask that money from me. But
they're fining because it's not objectively. They can't throw you in jail for it because it's not an objective crime because there's no victim. So they're fining. They're actually telling you this is an objective crime. Not wearing a mask is not an objective crime. It's a policy, and it's a policy violation. Therefore, we will fine you. If you get with these other organizations that I talked about earlier, Empower and Solutions Empowerment, they have forms that you can send in to reject those fines. So, because you don't, even paying them is not mandatory if you have the right paperwork and the right understanding for your area. Each area is different, but you can find out how to do it. So, plus, like here in Holland, you have a little piece of paper you can download off the internet that says, I don't have to use a mask. You're supposed to have like a doctor's note or something like that, but not really. You don't have to have a doctor's note, and you just show them that, and they go, okay, I don't have to have a mask. So it's they give loopholes. They give loopholes because they understand the laws of consent, and they have to give those loopholes so that you can get around it.
So it means there's always a loophole for anything.
Yes, there's always a loophole for all these agreements because they know they can't hold. They have to. The way the laws of consent work, if they didn't leave the loopholes, they would fail very fast. But the loopholes, like they have this perfect balance of loopholes to agenda. And if they can leave enough loopholes for the few people that do research to get out, the few people that do take responsibility to get out, then they're fine, and they can trick the rest of the masses into doing what they want.
And is there also that's maybe on a larger perspective? Is it also that if the majority consents to something, that then the minority is not really relevant anymore?
No,
is it something like that, or is it on an individual basis that even if 8 billion minus 1 people on this planet would consent to something and I didn't, I still would have a loophole available?
Yes, because natural law does not apply, and rights do not apply to groups. It applies to individuals. Only the individual has rights. Groups have no rights. Corporations have no rights. Individuals have rights. Natural people, natural persons have rights. Now, corporations have certain types of rights, but they're not natural rights. So natural rights are only for people. They're inherent. They're within us.
One of the terms I heard in another conversation is that like what we are as a man, a woman, but we are buying into believing we're a person, and by acting as a person, we are basically consenting to have some rights being taken away from us. And if we act as a person, we then might not have like the full rights accessible in terms of what you said before, travel or something. Does that fit into that perspective, or is that?
Well, I'm more going from like the natural person versus artificial person, where artificial person is a corporation, and like people based on their birth certificate are considered corporations.
Mhm.
They're an artificial person. But then when you claim yourself as a natural being, natural person, you are no longer a construct, you are a person. And as a person, you can be a man or a woman. And now you're looking at you're looking at the, the law of gender, male, female. And being a male, being a female comes with certain, abilities in polarity. So you're still aligning. I'm aligning myself as a male, or I'm aligning myself as a female.
And like to maybe repeat myself, so that's that's possible at any time, no matter the age. It depends on me taking internal responsibility and claiming my rights, my property. And when I do that, there are loopholes. There's a way to
Loopholes are presented to you if you look hard enough.
Okay.
If you are creating them, you will find them. They're there. You just need to find them. And in many ways, sometimes you have to create them. But you create them through the creative process, not by going to the government and making a loophole. But it's about like I'm always 10 steps ahead. I'm just always 10 steps ahead of government and all that kind of stuff in my own personal situation. And without getting into any details, I'm just 10 steps ahead because, for example, I didn't have a mask on, but I had a visor because I have a boundary that says I'm more than happy to wear a face shield to comply with mask laws because, one, my face can be seen because masks are about making it so you can't be seen. They want the cloth mask. They specify cloth mask because they want to cause problems with your breathing, and they want to use to signify the loss of free speech. Well, a visor counters both of those. I don't like doing it. I don't feel free doing it, but I'm okay using that. So I say yes, but I do a conditional acceptance. I say yes, but, and I'll talk about that later. I'll wear a face shield instead of a mask. So yes to the mask law through face shield. So I'm on a train, and trains you get fined for not having a cloth mask. It doesn't matter if you have a face shield or not. It doesn't matter if you have asthma or not, or the card or whatever. Don't ride the train, period, if you have a mask. So they get on the train. There's a police officer on the train, or whatever they call the train police. And he comes up to me and he's going to write me a ticket. It's like, you have to have a mask. It's going to get a ticket. And I was like, I have a shield. I'm more than happy to wear a shield. I struggle with asthma. I'm definitely not putting on a cloth mask. Sorry, man. Do what you got to do. But because I had set the boundary, karma was on my side, not his. Because I had said yes, but. And all of a sudden, it was like this light bulb went on in his head. Like there was somebody above him that was just dropping an idea in his head. And he went, you know what? It's all good. It's obvious you're probably just a tourist or whatever, and I'm just going to go talk to, talk to the other people, tell everybody you're fine. And off he walked. No confrontation, no, showing or proving legal forms or that kind of thing, because I was in alignment with karmic law, with natural law. I had set a boundary, so everything was on my side. And no matter what the law said, I was fine riding the train without a cloth mask because I'm in alignment. As long as you're in alignment, you're 10 steps ahead of everything. It's not that they're even looking for you because you're not causing problems. I'm not fighting them. I'm not trying to pick fights with them. I'm not going after them. I'm not being rude. I'm not begging them to, I'm not begging to get into a fight and prove how right I am and, defeat the bully and be the superhero. I don't need any of that. Just leave me alone.
So you're kind of accepting others' free choice, but then also you want others to accept your free choice.
Right. You want to wear a mask? Wear a mask. You want to give people tickets and play that game? Go for it. I'm not a part of that game. I was very respectful to the guy. It was nice. That's kind.
And from a technical perspective, is that like some kind of agreement, which was
Yeah, my agreement. I'm not consenting to their. I consent to the deal, not to the mask.
so basically they like prepared an offer, or I don't know what was.
Yeah, I rejected their offer. I made a counter offer in the karmic realm. It's not like I signed a piece of paper, sent it into them, and said this. I did it in the spiritual, the mental plane, the plane of causality. What some people might call the karmic plane. So if you read the book The Kabbalion, you'll see that there's different planes of existence, and in those planes of existence, there's planes of causality. And the master is able to basically do all their work in the planes of causality and then just experience the effects down here. And as we go through an effect down here, then we can course correct, tweak our boundaries a little bit and see how it works again. The plane of effects where we're living in this material realm just gives us feedback.
So then what technically is happening on this mental plane is there are permanently, I don't know the exact term, but offers being made, and depending on if you accept them or not, that reflects on what you're experiencing then.
Yep.
So it would be very good to become aware of what kind of offers are being introduced to you. If and if I remember what you said, that if you ignore an offer, it means it's accepted.
Yeah. And so I'll in a little bit.
Okay. Please.
So I was saying blasphemy is when our subjective preferences, which are the jurisdiction of agreements, are held equal to objective truth and natural law. Policy and statute laws are laws that are made without our consent. They're made by a group of individuals and oligarchs or whatever, or even voting. And then treated as objectively moral laws, such as are found with involuntary taxes, mandatory mask and vaccination statutes. They're blasphemous. There must be a victim for there to be an objective crime. Therefore, it is merely a subjective offense without any merit. And this requires either tacit or explicit consent. Tacit consent means that you are silent. And because you are silent, that you consented.
Or you even don't know that you've been made an offer.
Right.
Yeah.
Dumb. Dumb to it. Explicit consent is where you've explicitly consented and say, yes, I'm totally for that. I understand what you're asking me to do. I agree. So agreements require either tacit or explicit consent. It doesn't require consent for objective morality. When you look at natural law, it's not about consent. I can travel freely without anybody's consent. Now, if I'm going to travel freely and go into your house, I need consent. Going into your house is an agreement. If I don't have an agreement, I don't have your consent, and I go into your house, that is a crime, an objective crime.
So basically, to enter in someone's property, you need an agreement. But as long as you don't enter someone's property, you don't need consent. You're free.
Right. Yeah. So that's the difference between the objective morality and agreements. Offenders. So the ones making the offers, they're offending. They're making offers, at least in the government and stuff.
The offenders.
They understand that policies are not objective laws and are therefore governed by the laws of consent, and they leave loopholes for those who do not consent to discover, as this allows for their agendas to move forward with the blessing of the karmic laws of the universe. So, like I said, they understand the sweet spot of how many loopholes they have to leave for people to get out, so that they can continue with their agenda.
And here, one question. So, if you say that they are aware of natural law, who is they? Is that everybody who studied law, or is part of the police, or is that
secret societies, dark occultists, people who are actually controlling the world? Not their mid-level management. Their mid-level management are clueless. They're just
But a judge at court, he knows about that.
Judges typically do, yes.
Okay, so it's part of their education to be introduced to.
They understand the game, yes. That's why, when Cal Washington walked into the courtroom, people were running. The judge was running because he didn't want any part of Cal, because he understood he did not want to be liable.
Interesting.
So, like Jesus said, we need to build our house on the objective rock of truth, on the foundation, on a good foundation. So objective natural law should be our foundation, while subjective agreements should be built upon the rock of objective truth and natural law. So our agreements are the houses that we build, and we need to be building those houses, those subjective houses, on the foundation of truth, natural law, universal principles.
Mm-hmm.
However, most of what passes for subjective agreements are held to be objectively moral and are not actually based on the objective principles of natural law. So, for example, most people are out there like, you don't have a mask on, what's your problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking it's objectively moral, but they're building their house on sand. And they're free to do that. They have the right to build their house on sand. Just don't expect me to help them fix it when the storm comes and knocks the whole thing down.
So basically, you're saying most of the people, they have a distorted sense of morality, like basically like what is good for them or bad for them, but not like
right. They're
objective
told,
measure.
Their why is given to them from others. They don't have their own. They don't have their own will to reason. Remember, last week we talked about how reason is what gives us our individuality. Reason is what gives us our autonomy. Boundaries are a part of that, actually.
One of the questions, though, I have, and that's something you said before, there's kind of two ways to claim your rights. One is like maybe like technically by doing paperwork and working your way out, and the other one is by aligning yourself with natural law. Like,
well, the best is to do it both. You
Yeah.
eventually have to, even if you do it with the natural law thing and aligning yourself, you eventually have to get right with the paperwork. But because if somebody is just filling out the paperwork and they don't have that state of being, they're still into this subjective morality thing. They're not very good with understanding whose responsibility is what. They're going to fill out this paperwork and they're going to get eaten for lunch. They're going to have things happen to them and people are just going to steamroll over them like it doesn't matter. The paperwork be damned. You have to be it before you can see it. So it can happen side by side. You could be like doing the paperwork and learning about yourself, and learning about yourself and doing the paperwork, and those kind of things can happen all together. But you do eventually need both.
But it's not that like the universal mechanism. If you're not aligned with it, like that you cannot work your way out of it because you're not yet aligned with it. It's not like that was something I was thinking about it, that as long as you're not aligned, like even with paperwork, you might not be
right.
Able to.
Yeah, you could have SWAT teams showing up and throwing you on the ground and roughing you up a little bit. So merchant law, lex mercatoria, is agreements. It's very similar to agreements. It's commercial law, how we go into commerce and we do transactions between each other. I'm going to give the anatomy of an agreement. This is anatomy of an agreement in commercial law, lex mercatoria, etc. First, there's an offer. So an offer would be face masks. You have to wear face masks. Or another offer could be you have to get a vaccine. Another offer could be we're going to install the smart meter in your house. These are offers. The second stage is full disclosure of terms and responsibilities. So another word for the terms is responsibility. Who is responsible for what? Now, full disclosure, we're going to say, well, this is what the health risks are. Well, in the case of vaccines and masks and smart meters, there's no full disclosure on their part. They're not actually telling you and disclosing any of the dangers. Also, it's very one-sided with the responsibilities. You take it in your house, you take the vaccine, you take the liability. Boom, I get a shot, I die. My property dies if I get this shot. There could be a really adverse side effect if I take this shot. I could die. It could, metaphysically lower my vibration. There's all different kinds of things that can happen on my side. Well, what's going to happen to them?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen to them if I die? Nothing. That's the responsibility is out of whack. They have no liability. I have all liability. So in those kinds of cases, the disclosure of terms is a little off. I'll give you an example in a personal relationship. For example, like you say, two people get together, one is monogamous, one is polyamorous. The monogamous person fully expects the other person to be also monogamous. Well, they come together, they start negotiating the terms. The person says, I want an open relationship. Okay, well, we have a problem here. Now, we don't have, if the person is an open relationship kind of person, but they say, hey, I'm fine with monogamy with you, but that's not really them, there's going to be a lot of problems in that experience because they're not in alignment, or maybe they're agreeing for a certain amount of time or something like that. But there has to be a full disclosure so that everybody can make the best choice. Now the monogamous person can say, ooh, I don't know. I like you, but I don't know if I can handle the polyamory. That's fair enough. There was disclosure. We talked about it. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. But you have to be able to accept people saying, not for me, I'm moving on. But that's one of the reasons why we don't do full disclosure, because we like the person, we're attached to the person, we want that person. And if we tell them everything, oh, by the way, I have a criminal history, they might not like me. And so I'm going to hold some details. I'm not going to disclose. And that's going to cause problems. Well, for me, in my relationships, I fully disclose. I disclose everything that is necessary for them to make a good choice. Do you really want to date me? Do you really want to be involved with me? This is what you're getting into. Full disclosure of terms up front. And another one, like even sleeping together. I won't let somebody sleep with me. I'll say no to sex until they agree to certain things. Full disclosure before even sex happens. I'm not having them fall in love with me, if they don't know all the terms up front.
Mm-hmm. So by fully disclosing where you are, you're then avoiding karmic consequences by
right.
not again having your thoughts, emotions, actions aligned.
Right. If they're making a choice to be with me, now they know what they're getting into.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm a handful.
So it's basically being transparent. It's giving the other person free choice instead of manipulating them into something they're not aware of. Okay.
Right. And a lot of people do that because they're emotionally attached to outcomes. But once you're free from that attachment to those outcomes, now you can have everything you want, your heart's desire, because, hey, I create it for myself. I don't need you to be aligned with me, because if not you, somebody else. Of course, I would like it to be you. I like you. But if not, I honor your free will. I honor your choice. I honor, that I gave you full disclosure and you made a choice. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, they don't want full disclosure. But that is also a choice. Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. I'm just going to be blissfully unaware. Okay, well, that's fine. That's your choice. Mm-hmm. You know what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, but if we come back to the vaccine example, if there's no full disclosure of terms, or the responsibility is very one-sided, how is that karmically then? It's basically not really supportive for this.
They're making the offer, so you can't say no. They're making the offer, so you can't say no to that offer. So I'll explain that here in a little bit.
Okay.
Let's get on to the different parts of this. So without a full disclosure of terms, the agreement is fraudulent and can be torn up. So some people are saying that like the banking system is based on fraud. There's not a full disclosure of terms, even though there's like 1,000 different disclosures of things that you're going through, that the actual central banking system itself is fraudulent. And if that's the case, then all of the things like mortgages, et cetera, that are built upon this system are also fraudulent. And then all those agreements will go away after the reset. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Most agreements today are fraudulent because most of the terms are concealed. Either concealed in our personal relationships because, we're making claims that we're writing checks that our bank accounts can't handle, so to speak. For example, in our marriages, we say to death do us part. You're writing a check that you can't keep because you have no idea what's going to happen. Are you going to do death to us part if that person's a narcissist? Are you going to do death to us part if they steal from you? Are you going to do death to us part if they're, toxically, living with toxic shame and etc.? You can't know what tomorrow holds. So saying to death to us part is writing a check that your bank account can't handle. We need to be very careful with how we're making agreements. But you said you were going to be with me forever. Yeah, but you have 5, you cheated on me and lied to me these 10 times. Fraud. Or I grew. I have new likes and desires and wants. It doesn't have to just be because of fraud that we renegotiate our deals. We can just grow as people and grow apart as people. So buyer beware in our agreements, especially when it comes to what's going on right now when it comes to disclosure. So remember, part 2 of the negotiator of the of an agreement is first is the offer, second is full disclosure of terms. Well, in this full disclosure of terms, it's buyer beware, because people do not do their due diligence in advance to making agreements with a predatory class. Heck, people don't do their due diligence in their relationships. They're going to meet somebody that they're going to marry and they haven't done their due diligence. They're with a narcissist or something, or they're with somebody that's they don't really understand the implications of what marriage and the responsibilities of marriage. They haven't done their due diligence. So most people do not do their due diligence in advance to making agreements with a predatory class. They behave as if it is binding, and therefore it is binding upon them. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy due to their own ignorance. The elite count on this ignorance and lack of due diligence to further their agendas. But it's a law. You have to wear a mask. Well, it's fraud. All the science they're bringing, to prove this is fraud. The philosophical side, when you look at the philosophy side of it all, well, they're doing mandatory things. They want me to wear a mask to keep you safe. Well, that's like asking me to light myself on fire to keep you warm. No, not my responsibility. Again, it's about responsibility. My responsibility is to me and my property, not your property. I'm not being aggressive. I'm not walking over to you and punching you. But then they'd say something like, but there's this microscopic thing that you can't see that could be causing offense.
And would the whole picture changes if science actually would back it up? Then that would be lawful?
Not in the way that they're presenting it.
Okay.
I mean, they would have to, there's so many different science. First of all, is never settled. Science is a process methodology, and they're using it as a means of consent. They're using it as a proof by assertion fallacy, and also the proof by authority. What is it? Not proof by authority, but it's an authority fallacy. Not proof by authority, but it's an appeal to authority. So it's basically science is the priest class, and the priests are telling the people how to behave. That's not science. Science and consensus shouldn't be in the same sentence, ever. I don't, the truth is a truth is a truth. And if 9 people, replicate a lie and one person discovers the truth is, the scientific method is what dictates what truth is. The outcome. So phase 3 is the negotiation of terms. So after you have full disclosure, now you negotiate. Now you get in, you crack your knuckles and you start the negotiation process. Whose responsibility is what? You're giving me a loan. I'm going to pay you back. You're giving me this money up front. That's your responsibility. I'm going to pay you back this amount of time, etc. In a relationship, you're like, okay, I've disclosed these terms about, who I am. You disclose who you are. You have children involved. I don't have children involved. What are our responsibilities? Let's negotiate that. What do you expect of me? You expect me to be there taking your children to school every day? Do you expect me to, help you raise them? Do you expect me to basically just be completely hands off when you tell me about that? What is these terms of our agreement? And now stage 4 is the agreement is now based on the consent of both parties. So both parties consent, and now you have an agreement.
Which then, as you said before, it can be renegotiated or withdrawn from at any time.
Well, the thing is, like, let's say in a relationship, you're going along and you start realizing things, and you set boundaries along the way, and eventually these boundaries, which are negotiations, micro negotiations, change things. So it's really kind of like, as an example of boundary, I'm more than happy to do dishes when I have a dishwasher. They want me to do dishes. I don't really want to do dishes without a dishwasher. So my boundary is I do dishes when there's a dishwasher. Okay, do you want me to do dishes? Let's get a dishwasher. So we get a dishwasher. Well, I want you to pay half the dishwasher. Oh, fine. That's fine. Whatever. So we buy a dishwasher. Now I do dishes all the time. That's like negotiating along the way. Because you don't actually talk about everything, in a relation. But you do need to set boundaries because things come up that help you define what you like, what you want. In merchant law, there's no such thing as no. There's tacit consent, also known as suffering, which is a result of saying nothing. So if you say nothing you're just suffering through it, that is tacit consent. I'm wearing a mask. I'm suffering through wearing a mask every day. That is my consent. Me wearing a mask is my consent. Saying no doesn't work either. So that's just resistance. You're resisting them. They say yes, or they make an offer. You have to wear a mask. You say no. They go, yeah, but karma's on my side. I made the offer. You don't get to say no. You have to either wear a mask or you have to counteroffer. Now, they don't tell you can counteroffer. They don't want you to know you can counteroffer. They don't want you to know you can change the agreement. The government is all powerful, right? Objective, God. No, it's subjective. Government is not God. It's not objective. So we don't have to, we can't say no. And we can't just comply because that's consent. So what we do is we go into the explicit consent category. And then we say either yes, I'm going to wear a mask. Or yes, but I'm more than happy to wear a mask when it's a face shield because my face can be seen and I can breathe. Or I'm more than happy to take this shot when the doctor takes full liability and responsibility should there be an adverse effect. Payable this amount on this date after my, any kind of a problem. Now, doc, are you going to take responsibility, sign on the dotted line here that you're taking full liability and responsibility if there's any adverse effects on me? So you're saying yes, but now karma is on your side. So they are now in resistance. They're like, no. Well, you don't have to take it, but now I'm absolved. The karma is no longer, the karmic load, I would call this the karmic load, is no longer on their side, it's on my side. They're now on the defensive because I made a counteroffer.
It's kind of, if you're saying no, you're resisting, and there's this, I don't remember who said it, but you resist persists. Along those lines.
Right. And if you look at even like the laws of thermodynamics, and you look at current physics, and then you look at like torsion physics being like where you get free energy from and stuff. And in free energy, there's no resistance. In regular electricity and wires and stuff, there's resistance. So by learning this yes but system, you're getting into this torsion spiral in your own thinking, in your own consciousness. Your consciousness is becoming a spiral, is becoming a torsion field. And now that you are flowing in that way, you are without resistance. So life starts going really fast. You start growing really fast. You start moving really fast because there's no resistance. You're not overheating all the time. You're not having all these breakdowns in your body.
Yeah, one of the questions I have, and we might talk about later about this, I guess there's so many, at least implicit offers being made to myself or anyone, and
Right.
without even being aware that it is an offer. Like if you get a letter or something, maybe from the house lord or so, that's like pretty obvious, yeah. That oh yeah, okay, now I'm getting an offer with now listening to this conversation. This is an offer, but like all the other implicit kind of offers or contracts I'm entering into because I'm not even aware that someone wants something from me or so. Yeah,
right.
That's a big question I have right now.
Right. That's there is a lot that's coming in, but we can work through those in our microcosmic relationships. For example, I dated a lady that did not respect my autonomy and individuality. Through navigating this relationship, I started to realize that. So I set some boundaries, like I'm more than happy to date and interact with people that respect my autonomy, my individuality. Well, what did I do when I set that boundary is that I set something in the macrocosmic as well, because the police and those kind in governments don't respect people's individuality and autonomy. Well, because I had this microcosmic experience with a woman that was not respecting my individuality and autonomy apart from the collective groupthink, I was able to set a boundary on that. And once I set the boundary on that behavior, she literally just broke up with me 30 minutes later. I didn't even tell her the boundary. I just spoke the boundary energetically, and I'll talk about that later.
Okay.
When you set these boundaries energetically, like reality shifts around you. You don't. I call this boundary magic, but it's using these laws. It's using this understanding of agreements and natural law.
Okay.
Suffering, or another word for suffering is tolerance. Like I said, is the law terminology for tacit implied consent. So when somebody has the ability to speak up and they don't, they just suffer through. Like, well, as a victim, well, you had a chance to unvictimize yourself. You stayed in the situation. You're not a victim. So, like in these situations, you're not a victim because you kept staying with them. You agreed to this behavior.
Yeah, my gut feeling says there's a lot of suffering going on this planet.
A lot of suffering. Pain is not optional. Suffering is. Pain helps us to locate suffering. Then we can end our suffering by feeling a little bit of pain. But people are so afraid of pain, they go into suffering. Well, I can't just go into that store without a mask. I can't just, so I'm going to suffer through it. The pain of the confrontation is too scary. The pain of taking responsibility for my body is too scary. I can't say no. I can't say yes, but. So yeah, suffering. So whatever I made a little quote. Whatever we suffer through, we consent to. Whatever we suffer through, we consent to.
Here comes like something I have been thinking about. No, like depending on what you believe is possible or not, there are possibly some children on this planet which are in a very, very dark place, like being abused, like exploited, sex trafficking. Right. Like, are they technically also creating that?
I'm not going to answer that question in that way because that is a discussion, and it's something that would need to be It doesn't have a simple answer. But I will say that there are legit victims in the world at certain levels. And I've met them. We're talking about people that were, traumatized from, ritual satanic abuse. We're talking about childhood molestations and things like that. At a certain level, there's still consent. Say somebody was a predator in a past lifetime and they come back to experience what it's like to be on the other side of that. As an example, or a soul comes in because they want to deconstruct trauma, and they have to experience it to understand it from a soul level. But we're getting into some really, multi-dimensional thinking when we get there. We're not just looking at it from a very, we're not looking at it from a criminal, and there's consent, but it's at a very different level. I have done sessions with people, trauma sessions. I specialize in trauma sessions for a long time. And I would do trauma sessions with people, and then I would give them the option of considering that it was a possibility that on some level they consented to it. And it actually helped clear the trauma, the emotional charge from it. Like people that were shaking, like their whole bodies would react when they would relive the trauma. They would go into seizures about it. And at the suggestion and the possibility, as we're working through this, that maybe on some level it was fair because they wanted to learn about it and deconstruct it, or maybe there were some, experiences that they had in other lifetimes and stuff, and that there was a choice made somewhere on some level that they had control over. And to know that they had some form of control in that situation relieves the trauma. So at least from a practical standpoint, there is some utility in it. Everybody's different. I'm not going to say for sure what their reason is and why they experienced it, but there's always a reason.
And even not knowing about your rights is like, if that's technically a consent, then like,
So in agreements, terms can be renegotiated at any time. However, to enter into an agreement with the intent of renegotiating down the line to get a more favorable set of terms is predatory, not negotiating in good faith. So we talked about this. It's out of alignment. You're not in congruence within yourself. And you're not being upfront and honest and fully disclosing the terms. As we change, though, our terms can change, but we should never agree to something with the intent to change it down the road, as that is not an upfront disclosure of terms, but fraud. Like, for example, as a man that is non-monogamous, if I were to go into a relationship, says, yeah, sure, I'm going to be poly, I'm going to be monogamous with you, but secretly deep down is like, I'm thinking once she's really locked into me and she really, really loves me and she can't do without me, then I'm going to introduce non-monogamy again. That is not negotiating in good faith. That is predatory. That would be, people, you just need to say, no, this is who I am, and this is how, Now you might not realize you're doing it. You might say, well, maybe I could do that. Maybe I can try monogamy for a little bit with you because I really like you. But that's part of the negotiation. And now they know it's a possibility that you're doing this, but you're doing it for them, or you're doing it because you really want that. But they also need to realize when they're negotiating with you that there's a possibility that you're going to change your mind down the road. You can't agree to always and forever, because always and forever is a really long time.
Well, like one thing just comes into my mind: are contracts persisting beyond lifetimes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well.
So like, they're really based on the soul level. It's not, they're not tied to my physical body in a sense, or depending on the agreement.
Yeah, I mean, we have different layers of agreements. Yes.
Okay.
Like maybe you have like a theme that you're going to contract to work through certain types of trauma. So for me, my multiple lifetime theme is betrayal, working through betrayal. That means in some lifetimes I'm the betrayer. Some lifetimes I'm the betrayed. And some might have like, the theme of narcissism, and others might have the theme of, borderline personality disorder and being damaged by narcissists. It really just depends on the person and what they've agreed to work on.
Interesting.
So one thing that is really interesting as well is that psychopaths and narcissists, or any kind of predatory type, they're able to weaponize agreements and boundaries to control people. And it's not a real boundary. They're like, oh, but it's just a boundary. I'm just setting my boundary. And what I believe is a boundary is different than what you believe is a boundary. Well, it's not necessarily a boundary. I mean, in some cases, that might just be a misunderstanding of boundaries. I'm not saying that everybody's predatory when they say that. But there are certain people that know full well they're fucking with you, that they're messing with you. And they are using boundaries and just don't, you're crossing into my space by doing this. Narcissists are classic. They're really good at this. They trigger you, they cause an offense, they act aggressively. And then when you respond to them, they're the victim. You're acting aggressive. No, you're acting defensive. They fail to acknowledge the first infraction, and they only acknowledge the retaliation to the infraction.
So it means that that boundary has no power.
Well, it has power as long as people think it does.
Okay. So it's kind of an illusion.
Yeah, it's a manipulation. If you believe it, it's there.
But then also that implies if you think of this world being like,
well, look at the mask laws and the shot laws. They're convincing you that not getting a shot or not wearing a mask is aggressive. It's not. That's why it's only punishable by fine. It's not aggressive. You're not harming anybody by not getting a shot. You're not harming anybody by not getting a mask.
mm-hmm.
There's no harm, no foul, because you're not doing anything. But they convince you that you are. So they're just saying, but we're just being reasonable here. You just need to do it to protect society. That's an example of weaponizing boundaries.
Yeah. So that, like, if I cross that boundary, then this illusion, there's no karmic consequence, basically.
Right. Exactly. So predators do not disclose the full terms or the responsibility. And they often shun liability and responsibility and place liability and responsibility on others. So a really big key is like narcissists. Everybody thinks that they're dominant. They're not. They're controlling. The controlling person puts liability on everybody around them. And then the people who are controlled that submit to that control are the ones taking full responsibility and liability. They're taking full consequences where the predator takes no consequences. But a true alpha takes liability and responsibility for themselves and gives, whereas the narcissist or the controlling person takes. So the controlling person is stealing, they're taking. They're using lies and deceit and manipulation to get things. Whereas the alpha is dominating, but they're not controlling. They're natural, it's dominant. They're taking responsibility. So the wolf, the alpha wolf, takes full responsibility for the pack. His butt is on the line when he's protecting the pack from aggression. He's the one that is responsible for making sure the pack survives. He has all the liability, or most of the liability. They submit to him because of that. So that's the true leadership. The true leader, the true dominant alpha, is taking responsibility and liability. And that's how you can tell. Vaccine makers, they removed all responsibility, all liability from all vaccine manufacturers. Boom. Well, what does that tell you? That tells you they're controlling. They're in a really good position to control. They're taking no responsibility, no liability, and they're making bank. They get all the rewards, they get none of the liability. Hey, what a great deal. Who takes all the responsibility? Us. Who takes all the liability? Us.
But karma is not circling back to them because we're consenting to it.
Exactly. So we can, that's when you say yes, but. So we'll get in the anatomy of a boundary now. So the next section is anatomy of a boundary. So a boundary is, they help us to discern responsibility. Look at the garden in the backyard, the back garden. You have a house, you have a property, you have a fence around your house. That fence tells everybody what is and is not my responsibility, what it is and is not their responsibility. It tells me where my responsibility begins and where my responsibility ends. So boundaries tell us about responsibility. When we're in a contract, we're making an agreement with somebody, we're disclosing responsibilities, the terms, whose responsibility is what. Well, a boundary is also about responsibility. When I buy a piece of property, I have to see what the boundaries are of that property, because that tells me what I'm paying for and what is my responsibility, what's not my responsibility. My neighbor's garden is not my responsibility. The fence, the boundary, tells me where my property begins and ends. Now, if my neighbor takes a big sack of trash and dumps it into my yard, they're taking their responsibility and dumping it into my yard. Not acceptable. Because the boundary tells us where that begins and ends.
But if I'm not saying like if I'm accepting that they're throwing the trash on my property, like kind of I'm consenting again, yeah, or to cross my boundary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boundaries do not tell others what to do. They tell us whose responsibility is what. So a lot of people think that setting a boundary is telling people what to do. It's not. I can't, if I'm just setting a boundary by telling my kids to clean their room. Well, you can't tell your kids to clean your room. You can't force them to clean their room. What you can do is you can use what's called enforceable statements. Hey, I definitely want, we're going to go get some ice cream today, and you're more than happy to come along with us to get ice cream when your room's clean, as an example. Because I can enforce that. The children that have done their clean their rooms get to go get ice cream afterwards. So yes, you're more than happy to get ice cream after your room's clean. And if you don't want your room clean, that's fine. You just don't get ice cream. That's fine too. You don't have to have ice cream.
One thought, so like, as a parent, and like if this is a way to educate children, are they not learning then only if I get something I'm
well, it's
doing
about
something?
responsibility. So like if let's say a child is throwing a temper tantrum and they want to talk to you and they're yelling at you, and you say, oh, I'm more than happy to talk to you when your voice is calm like mine. And then they can, yeah, you're a bad mom. I'm more than happy to talk to you when your voice is calm like mine. Yeah, they're Jared's parents, they're better than you. Well, I'm sure they are, but if you want to talk to me, your voice has to be calm like mine. What you're doing is you're showing them that you're willing, you're basically negotiating your terms for the interaction. I don't have conversations with people. It's not my responsibility to have conversations with people who are abusive. I get to choose who I have conversations with. So you're in a negotiation. If a child is throwing a temper tantrum, as an example, and you're like, well, I had an energy drain from you. I'm not going to help you do this today. You wanted me to take you to soccer practice, but you're just going to have to call on your friends and go with them instead. Because I'm not wanting to take you to football practice or soccer practice, whatever, right now, because you drain my energy with, your big temper tantrum there. You're negotiating. Bad behavior does not get enabled. I'm not going to support bad behavior.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. It's all these are just little micro details, right? It's not like I'm negotiating whether or not to be in a relationship with my child. But if it gets to a certain point and they're getting thrown into jail or something, or rehab, or that kind of stuff, then obviously maybe there is some negotiation that's going to be like, well, you're still my child and I'm going to love you even if you're in jail, but I'm not taking responsibility for the things that you're doing. We have to negotiate what's best for us. And one of the things is one of the things I did with a child once was, the room needs to be clean. It's just a disaster. There's dishes under the bed. There's, it's attracting bugs. It's a health problem. So the dance is on Friday night. It's Monday right now, or Sunday right now. Is it reasonable to ask if the house can be clean, or your room can be clean, before you go to the dance on Friday night? Yeah. Okay. Is it reasonable? Do you want me to remind you at all during the week, or do you not want to be reminded? Don't remind me. Okay. Awesome. Have fun. And just as a side note, I want you to know that if you don't clean it by Friday, don't worry about it. On Friday, I'll clean it while you're at the dance. Now, there was a little caveat. You might not like how I clean it. I'm not as thorough. I don't know what you like, what you don't like. A lot of it, to me, it might all end up in the trash, or a lot of it might end up in the trash. So I don't really, you're a better judge of what should go in the trash, what shouldn't go in the trash, because it's your stuff. So I hope you do it by Friday. Friday came and went. No clean room, dishes under the bed still. She went to the dance. Me and her mother went in the room with the 2 giant trash bags. We cleaned the room. She came back. It looked great. She was never angrier. We couldn't make her clean the room. We could give her natural consequences, though, for not cleaning the room. Because there is a family. She is underage. She is subject to us. She has not graduated to the law of reason within herself. She's not responsible enough to take care of herself. We have to take care of for her. So under natural law, we are bound to educate her in reason by giving her natural consequence. What happens if she doesn't pay her bills? They shut off her gas. They shut off her electricity. They do things she's not going to like if she doesn't have it done by this time. We're educating her, helping her understand that life has consequences.
Makes a lot of sense.
So yeah, we didn't tell her. So boundaries don't tell people what to do, but they do tell whose responsibility is what, and then who's going to do what. Like, if you decide not to do your room, I'm going to clean it instead, because it is our house. It is a health hazard right now with all the bugs that you could be attracting, etc., and mice and that kind of thing.
So it's basically you're defining a reaction to crossing your boundary,
we're setting a limit and letting it's enforceable by us. It's called an enforceable limit. It's enforceable. Okay, another thing. I'm more than happy to talk to you when your voice is calling mine. It's enforceable because it's about my energy and when I talk. I have one that helps me get myself out of narcissist way. I'm more than happy to connect with and do business with co-create with people who are reflective. Narcissists are not reflective. They're incapable of self-reflection. Therefore, by setting a boundary that says I'm more than happy to connect with and interact with people on a deep level that are reflective and capable of self-reflection, I just removed all narcissists from my life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you said you would talk about that, how you set that boundary. Like, is it like you're speaking it? Or?
Yeah. Okay, so in law terminology, boundaries are equivalent to a conditional acceptance. It's the yes, but. So yes, I'm going to talk to you because the child's making the offer. When the child is yelling at us or insulting us and talking rude, they're making an offer. Talk to me. We're counter offering with a conditional acceptance. Hey, I'm more than happy to talk to you when your voice is calm. The negotiation. So it is a conditional acceptance. Yes, but. Yes, I'll talk to you when condition X is met. Calm voice. For online discussions, I'm more than happy to talk to people who are collaborative thinkers. Because a lot of times people are arguers and they just want to argue all the time. Oh, but it's just about a debate and a healthy debate. No, you're a sophist. You don't care about the laws of, the rules of logic. You don't care about coming to the truth. You just want to win. I'm more than happy to talk to people who love the truth. I'm more than happy to interact with people and to spend my energy on people that are willing to hold fair-minded discussions with me. So that's another boundary. Yes, but. So both boundaries and conditional acceptances are a spiral motion. They can be likened to mental Aikido. Aikido is a martial art that spirals. So when the attacker comes, they spiral out of the way and you lose very little energy. The person spiraling in the middle, the Aikido practitioner, spends a little bit of energy and the attacker spends a lot of energy. So they learn that it's not an efficient use of energy to attack you because you just keep spiraling. You don't get hurt. Nothing affects you. And they're the ones using all their energy because karma is on your side.
Mm-hmm.
They use the energy, the one making the offer uses the energy, and we flip the karma back on. We flip the karma so that karma supports us, not them. The karmic load is on the side of the one making the offer until it is negotiated, and yes, but flips the burden of responsibility from the one making the offer, or from the one having the offer made to them, or the one being accused. So like if somebody's being accused, so like a narcissist would accuse you of something, you hate old people because you don't want to get your vaccine. You won't wear a mask. You must hate old people. They're making an accusation. That is also an offer. The accusation is an offer. Now you can flip that by saying the yes, but. I say it all the time. People accuse me of things. I go, oh yeah, might be right. That's a possibility. Boom, Aikido. I don't even have to set the boundary. I just spiral on that one. Huh? I'm a horrible person, huh? I guess that's a possibility. I don't know. I'm not going to defend myself. I'm not going to argue with that. Okay, sure. Why not? You're evil. You hate old people. Okay, I guess that's a possibility. Somebody says, yeah, well, I think you're wrong. This, and this. Oh, sure. Okay. Just a quick spiral. No need to use a lot of energy on that. It doesn't bother me. If it did bother me, then I would process my emotional upset, set a boundary. After I set the boundary, it's very easy to not be emotionally upset anymore. Now I can accept them. So the difference between tolerance, suffering, so tolerance and suffering are the same word, and acceptance is boundaries. When you tolerate something, you're consenting to it. When you're accepting something, you've negotiated in good faith. Tolerance doesn't have negotiation. No boundaries are set. If you accept it, you've probably negotiated it if you're a good negotiator. If you've negotiated, you made counter offers. Now you can fully accept the person because their behavior that bothers you, you don't have to suffer through as it doesn't affect you because you negotiate yourself out of it. So you ever hear people, you just need to accept it. You just need to be in acceptance. Acceptance is impossible without negotiation of your terms, without setting boundaries. Otherwise, you're tolerating. So what most people pass off as acceptance is just tolerance or
So
suffering.
it's another big distortion.
Yes.
We're mistaking acceptance for actual tolerance or suffering.
Yeah. So we have to make a distinction between the two. Suffering and tolerance has no boundaries. Acceptance has boundaries. You're accepting something through negotiating, and that negotiation is your boundaries. Now you can accept them because they don't affect you. Like, for example, my children love tattoos. I have no tattoos. It doesn't bother me. I don't care if they have tattoos. They can tattoo their entire body. It's fine with me. Why? It doesn't affect me. I have boundaries. They're not going to try to force one on me. They're not going to hold me down and tattoo me. Like it doesn't affect my body. It's their property, not mine. What they do with their bodies is up to them. And if they're happy, that's good with me. Boundaries can often become the psychological equivalent of a notice of liability, which says yes to the offer only when the one making the offer takes karmic liability for any damage done by their offer. For example, more than happy to get that shot when you take full responsibility if I have a problem. As a contract, that's a conditional acceptance of mandatory vaccinations. You take full you find the person that's going to take full responsibility for that, then yes. Because they have the karmic load on them now, not me. I'm not consenting unless you take liability. Another one, sex. A lot of women, they're like, well, I said no. Well, so no doesn't mean anything in this kind of, when they're making an offer, a man's making an offer, he's making a sexual advance on you. They're making an offer. Silence is consent and no is consent. What is not consent is yes when I'm attracted to you. Now it might be a cold day in hell when I'm ever attracted to you. But I'm more than happy to say yes when I actually feel attracted to you. Right now you look like a troll. Right now I'm totally not into you. Right now you're really needy and clingy. So not attracted. But hey, I'm happy to say yes, when I'm attracted. As an example, I'm not saying that everybody would have this boundary. There would be, each person would find a unique situation, a unique yes, but.
So in terms of the vaccine, a possible response, or it's also yes when it is healthy.
Right. Yeah. I've even said yes when it's proven to actually be effective, because right now it's still in test. When it's had this study, this kind of study, the gold standard study, etc. When the aluminum adjuvant has been studied and its effects on humans, that kind of thing. Or how the Europeans say it, aluminium.
Say again, aluminium?
How the Europeans say it is aluminium.
In
America, we say aluminum.
Okay. Now I got it. Yeah.
So the next stage is instant karma. Instant karma is where they're like, well, we're going to hold you down against your will and do it anyways, even though you did the yes but. So there's two different instances. If you're not powerful enough, you do something called under protest. And that's where you agree under protest. Like, I'm retaining all my rights. I'm doing this action only because you have a gun on the side or you have the power to fire me, right? So you can fire me for my job. All my children starve. So I'm going to do this, and now you sign that I'm doing this under protest. So I'm saying yes, but I'm saying yes without consent. That's under protest. In certain situations, you just have to go with that because they have the gun and they're just moving, and they're not in a position to negotiate because they're just lackeys. They're low-level bootlickers. They're not there with any kind of so in a karmic level, you're taking no liability in that regard. And if something does happen to you, they're going to get stiff karmic consequences.
Okay, yeah, that was one of my questions. No, like, let's take the vaccine example again. If you're speaking to a doctor, so who has no idea about those things, and or you might be in a situation where you're forced to do so, even though you're expressing your yes, but you have to do it anyway.
They can say you don't negotiate. Okay, well, karma's on you then, right? So now under protest is one way of doing it, and the other is you just stand your ground. And for example, I had a guy, and I told you this in our initial consultation, grab me one time. It was in Las Vegas like 9 years ago. And there was a girl in my room that he wanted to see, a friend of mine. And he grabbed me, and he was drunk and he wanted to get in my room. And I said, yeah, you're more than happy to come in when she invites you. And boom, he fell over. Like he literally was knocked back by a force of nature that was not me. My words spoke. I said, I'm more than happy to do this, or you're more than happy to come in this room when she invites you. I said it multiple times, every time he grabbed me. Every time he grabbed me and I said it, he fell down on his butt. So instant karma. This is actually known within mystic circles as something that those people that have developed themselves enough have this ability. If you haven't developed your inner will enough, people aren't going to get knocked back like that. That's when you're going to have to do the under protest. But once you develop yourself where your will to reason is strong enough and you are really solid and self-governing, and if somebody makes an offer and tries to use coercion, then instant karma will hit them. So as an example in the Bible, the prophet Elijah called down fire onto the troops of a few different people, like one of the kings like Ahab or something like that, and burned them when they tried to come get him. He didn't consent, and karma fought for him, like the laws of nature fought for him. So in the book of Revelation, fire is said to come out of the two witnesses' mouth and consume anybody who tries to mess with them, who tries to kill them. Why? Instant karma. It's not that they're being aggressive, they're being defensive. That person made an offer, they spiraled, they didn't consent, they made a counter offer, the person tries to force it anyways, boom, instant karma. Not everybody is at that level of self-development to be a prophet or, a mystic Jedi type person. And in those situations, after you make the counteroffer and it doesn't work, you're going to have to go to the under protest. But that under protest means I'm reserving all my rights. I keep my rights. I'm not forfeiting my rights. Because if you consent to the mask, you're forfeiting your rights. If you wear the mask under protest, you keep your rights. From a natural law perspective, from a karmic perspective. So this is important because what it shows is that one individual is very powerful. We do not need groups. Everybody thinks that we need to collectivize and we need to form groups and we need to, the good guys versus the bad guys. It does not matter that, I don't have to go out and vote and, get everybody to vote my way and convince everybody, because I just need to be the change in my life because I'm doing this for me and my property and my family. And I care about other people and I want them to be happy. I do. But I don't have to convince everybody that they're wrong and I'm right in order for me to be safe. I can be safe regardless. I don't care if all of you go to hell in a handbasket. I'm going to be safe. My family's going to be safe. I'm going to take care of us. And whatever people choose is what they choose. But we're not bound by the decisions of all the other chuckleheads, all the other ignorant people, the stupid people. I don't have to convince them. I don't have to get in a fight with them. I can be ahead of the game.
No, that's a bit of the tendency, no? If you're like waking up and you discover a bit more what's going on, and that it's not reasonable to majority, and yeah, there might be that urge to do something and to be a preacher, convince people that they're on the wrong track. Yeah.
Right. Now I talk to people. I'm on this podcast, I share my wisdom with others. I let them see that there's another way. But like Jesus said, narrow is the path and few find it. And it's not my job to make sure everybody finds it, because that's not my responsibility, because I have boundaries. I'm responsible for me and my family, my property. And I'm going to do my best to, I'll let people know within reason if they ask, they want to know. People are voluntarily coming to your podcast to listen. Nobody's forcing them at gunpoint to listen to us. Wrapping things up a little bit, I have a point on voluntarism. Voluntarism is the notion that all interactions, agreements should be voluntary, and that they should have explicit consent. The right to negotiate and renegotiate the terms of our agreements is there. That's also encouraged, that people can negotiate and renegotiate the terms of our agreements. It should always remain voluntary at any point. That means that we can leave at any point. If an interaction is not voluntary, I'm not saying monogamy is involuntary, but I say that I think that the way that some people practice monogamy is involuntary. If there's this threat of divorce and losing everything, and all kinds of financial repercussions and stuff like that, if you don't follow the societal norm, then that's not necessarily a voluntary contract. That I think that all relationships, however they manifest, should be voluntary and consensual and based in agreements, and that these agreements should be able to be renegotiated as people grow, as things change.
Makes a lot of sense, and it's very, very much intuitive. We should be educated in that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
You're doing, so
doing my best. So agreements that make one party enslaved to another without any possibility of escape, such as mortgages, involuntary slavery without possibility of leaving the agreement, selling minors or others into slavery, involuntary taxes are inherently immoral because they're not voluntary. Relationships should remain voluntary, and involuntary family and or marital partnership relationships are also immoral. I know we can't choose who our family is, but at a certain point, when we reach a certain age, we should be able to set boundaries about who we prefer to interact with. And if we don't prefer to interact with our family, then that should be fine. If our boundaries say that, I've outgrown my family was good for me when I was growing up, but maybe they were toxic growing up, and I'm leaving that situation because I've set boundaries. They no longer meet my minimum standards for a healthy interaction. So to have a voluntary society, we first need voluntary relationships, as a microcosm is a fractal representation of the macrocosm. So if you really want to beat the system, you have to learn how to have a voluntary interactions in your own family. You have to learn how to navigate romantic relationships in a voluntary fashion. That means you need to get over your fear, your control, binding people to you, the use of manipulation and guilt to keep people in a relationship with you. You have to learn how to create your relationships in a happy way. This goes back to the law, the Hermetic principle of correspondence: as above, so below; as within, so without; as the microcosm, so the macrocosm. You want a voluntary society? Create a voluntary relationship. Live in voluntary relationships. Interact not just financially in a voluntary way, going to the farmer's market and, having voluntary transactions there, but also have voluntary transactions with your partners, with your children, with your friends. Don't use manipulation, guilt, shame to keep people with you. Let them be free. The cage door has to be open, and they always have to be able to leave.
Amen. Yeah. That's something I'm discovering or discovered. I would say also over the course of the last year that it frees so much energy when you take back your expectations, your projections, your wishes, your desires, like for something outside you, like of like kind of like projecting your desires on others. You actually like,
Right.
I want you to do that a certain way, and it binds so much energy. And if you just take that back and say you can do what you want, yeah, you're free.
Yeah, you do you.
Yeah,
We have to stay in our lane.
it is so freeing. Yeah,
yeah, and that's the thing. So instant karma, when I was talking about instant karma earlier, because I know how to stay in my lane, I don't go into other people's lane. Do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. That's actually a law. That's not just that's like an actual law. Yes, as you do unto others, as you do to people, people will do to you. So if I am out there violating everybody's rights, people are going to violate my rights. Well, the trick there then is, then you have to violate rights even more, and you have to keep going further into depravity, into, who's going to be the biggest bully in order to win. Well, that's too much work, man. That's hard. Let me just, if I see somebody violating my rights, that must mean somewhere I'm violating people's rights. How am I doing that? How in my relationships am I using guilt manipulation, shame manipulation, fear? How am I trying to make other people responsible for my welfare and success? If I can take full responsibility for myself and stop taking responsibility for others, then they're going to stop being able to interfere in my life. Like it can't happen. If I'm not interfering in people's lives, they can't interfere in mine. Therefore, instant karma. You try to interfere on mine, I'm going to run over you. You come into my lane, you get run over. I'm like a semi. I saw a motorcycle hit a semi once. It was not pretty. The motorcycle went into the semi's lane. And that's what happens with instant karma. That was instant karma. That is a metaphoric explanation of what happens when somebody is leaving their lane to go into somebody else's lane, when the person is in their power.
I've by far not arrived, but somehow I had a very controlling mentality and was obsessed and had thought through all kind of scenarios, and I had my lists and whatever, and that quite changed over the last year. And it was a little bit scary at first to kind of let go and not really having a clue what happens then. Yeah, there was a lot of fear of the unknown, and by having like control, like kind of intended to manage this fear, or not being exposed to this fear of like what happens when I don't have control. So it was a scary journey, but it's also this revelation that like that's the only way you possibly can become free, like, by not by not controlling anymore. Yeah, and
right. Right. And like how, in asking yourself questions like, how am I trying to take responsibility for others? How am I trying to get them to take responsibility for me? Like a lot of people are controlling by being the hero. They're taking over responsibility for others, and that's how they control it. Well, I can help this narcissist not beat me up or not abuse me by doing everything they want. So I'm going to enable their bad behavior, make excuses for their bad behavior because it keeps me safe. That's controlling. Also, you're taking responsibility for them. And then you could, and when you're on like the narcissist side, you can find your own inner narcissist. How am I making people responsible for me and then punishing them when they don't? So we can clear up all these issues around responsibility by setting boundaries. And as we do that, we get into our own lane. We don't leave our lane. So this is really the biggest problem with boundaries. This is really the biggest problem with law. So many people are not staying in their lane, and they don't even have a concept of what it means to stay in their lane. They don't understand karma. They don't understand instant karma. They think karma is just some kind of like, gooey liquid substance that is made up by the Hindu religion. But it's really just cause and effect. And it's about responsibility. And if you are getting into other people's responsibility, you're becoming either liable for them or you're making them liable for you. You're not in your lane. And there's so many different ways we do it. And it's always if there's fear there. Even preaching, people who are preaching to others and trying to get them to believe and to convince them, they're not in their lane.
So, instead of preaching, it would be to offer a perspective, and whoever is interested in
have discussions,
hearing about it, is invited to have a discussion or to talk about it or to hear more about it.
Yeah. The thing is, I don't need people to believe me in order for it to be true. I don't, and I like having conversations. I like sharing. I like people sharing with me. I like the discussions that we have. I enjoy this discussion. I enjoy getting clients. But I don't need people to believe me for it to be true. I don't need people to believe me in order for it to be safe. I don't have to convince them. And therefore I'm not needy for it. I'm in my lane. A lot of people who are preaching are doing so because they're afraid and they feel like they have to, and they leave their lane because of it.
So what's the actual process of setting a boundary? Is it becoming conscious of what is going on? How you're reacting?
Resistance. So if you're having in a trigger or you're feeling resistance to something, you have to understand why you're in resistance to that. And there's a need. So you have to, they make an offer. You have to fill into that offer. And then you set. So like my girlfriend at the time wanted me to do dishes with her because she hated doing dishes by herself. Because we just had a sink and had to do dishes by hand. And I felt so much resistance to doing it. And I know I was a complete douchebag for not wanting to do dishes by hand with her and help. But actually, there was a lesson in this. My resistance was not doing dishes. My resistance was doing dishes by hand. Well, I looked at the resistance. I examined it. I resist doing it by hand. Where do I not feel resistance? I don't feel resistance by doing it in a dishwasher. So I'm more than happy to do dishes when we have a dishwasher. She was like, wait, what? She's like, so are you saying that if I go and get a dishwasher right now, you'll do dishes? Yes. And in fact, I'll do dishes every day for the rest of the time we're together, which happened to be like 6 years. So after I said that, it was like, meet me. She was a road runner and she got a dishwasher and I was doing dishes from then on. It's not that I was against dishes. My preference, because it's her subjective preference that I do dishes. However, as a counteroffer, it's my subjective preference that I do dishes with a dishwasher. There was no objective truth there. There was no victim. I'm not victimizing her. Now, she could kick me out of the house or whatever. You can't, I'm done with you. You won't do dishes. You're just a jerk. You don't help. But it's so much easier just to set a boundary and to come up and negotiate together, learn how to problem solve, negotiate. We were always negotiating like that. We had a really good relationship when it came to our terms. There was just a few things that, we weren't there. That's why we're one of the partners, but best relationship ever. It's a great relationship.
And that's also something.
It doesn't have to last forever for it to be a great relationship. It was an amazing relationship. It's just, it ranks super high for me. A good relationship has nothing to do with the longevity of
it. And setting boundaries or discovering where there's a need, possibly a need to set a boundaries, that's also something you're doing with your clients, right?
Yeah. I help them find their boundaries that they need. I help them in relationships. I help them with, all in relationships, really. Relationship to work, relationship to, their partners, relationship to prospective people they're meeting and dating, to family members. They have an experience that we look at where the resistance is, what the actual underlying need is. And then we set a boundary.
And like setting a boundary just means to define like a phrase or something and set the intention to.
Yeah, you're defining responsibility. Remember, a boundary defines responsibility. So you're saying yes, but so I'm more than happy to date a person when they are self-reflective. That's a boundary. I'm more than happy to engage in this conversation. To engage in conversations with people who have a calm tone of voice.
And that's something you're repeating in your mind, or that's something you're defining once, and
yeah,
you have to.
Some people need to say it for a few days, few weeks. They'll keep repeating it every day. Maybe they'll put it on loop on their iPhone and listen to it on loop, some of the boundaries they've set, so that they can really believe it. But at a certain point, I'm at a place now where I set a boundary one time and it instantly changes everything. Like reality shapes around me and rearranges itself around me whenever I set a new boundary. In fact, I've even seen people like, it's like a bark collar. So I'll set, a bark collar is where the dog barks and it shocks them. So I have boundaries set. So if somebody unnecessarily tries to attack me when I'm in my lane, so they're angry, I'm in my lane, they try to come into my lane, what happens is it acts like a shock collar, and they're like, yip, yip, yip. Like they feel it instantly. They feel the shame, they feel the guilt. Even if they're a narcissist, they feel it, and they can't run away from that, and they can't project it onto me. So it's like I'm not sticky anymore. I don't take on projections. I don't feel projections. If I do feel a projection, it just means I have to set a new boundary somewhere, that I missed a spot. And that's fine. Hey, I'm comfortable with pain. I feel pain all the time. It's okay. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to suffer.
So yeah, like if you set all possible boundaries, there's no pain anymore. Then, if that's possible, who knows?
Well, there's no suffering. There's no suffering anymore. You're still going to feel pain here and there, because we do live in a contrast-based universe, and a contrast-based universe helps us to find meaning. And between what we want, what we don't want, that's where meaning is created. And so you can't get away from having contrast. You're not going to create the utopia, but you can create a system that allows for you to easily navigate. It's like, okay, right now the negative is like 90% and the positive is 10%. When things get back into balance, it's like 90% positive, 10% negative. So we're going to have a little bit of contrast. We're going to feel a little bit of pain. We're going to work through that little 10%. We're going to find out what boundary we need. We're going to set it, and it's going to, keep us in balance. And we're going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep growing. We're going to keep expanding in consciousness. So yeah, we can't get away from pain. You just can't. But you can end your suffering.
What a powerful lesson, or like even information to hear. And I remember us talking a few days ago, and we thought that this conversation might be a little bit more compact than the other one, and it ended. It is again a very deep, profound, insightful conversation. So I'm really, really happy that you took the time, or taking the time, to be here and sharing all this incredible information with us. Is there like something else you want to add to this, or?
Well, yeah, I do want to say that this way of setting boundaries, using what's called a conditional acceptance to set boundaries, the yes but, spiraling our energy like Aikido, mental Aikido, is us going up to the mental plane and the causal plane and working there rather than fighting the effects. So instead of fighting the effects, we go to the realm of cause and we make changes. I call this boundary magic. We are casting spells with our boundaries. We are changing and manipulating reality in the causal plane, in the mental plane, and then in the realm of effects where we live, this material realm is where things happen. Now, we do live in a joint reality. So, it's not like I can just change it for everybody. That's why, 2020 was a hard year for a lot of people, a lot of contrast, a lot of things that people don't want. But we have to go through, feel the pain so that we can end the suffering. And all of this pain coming to the surface right now gives us an opportunity to end our suffering, because this is just ridiculous. But we've been living in a really ridiculous society for hundreds of years now. At least 150, 200 years, it's been just ridiculous and getting more ridiculous. And some communist countries, it's been ridiculous. So everybody getting to experience this now gives us the opportunity to work through and set boundaries. So this is actually an opportunity to feel the pain and end our suffering. It's like a global dark night of the soul.
Sounds very, very promising. And yeah, you very much inspired me. And
Okay.
I guess, or I know, like from the last conversation, quite a few other people. So yeah, thank you again, for really sharing this information. I to be honest, like besides you, I've never heard anyone talking about that, and probably also because I've never searched for it. So
yeah, well, I don't think anybody's. I got into all this through boundaries. My connection to law, my connection to philosophy, to natural law, to all of that came through learning how to set boundaries. So I got into empathy, critical thinking, and boundaries. And through setting boundaries and examining my psychological self, that's how I got here. So I approach natural law from the psychology side, Jungian shadow work, self-responsibility, self-reliance, setting healthy boundaries, becoming more responsible. His boundaries are all about responsibility. And that's why my angle is different, because I'm approaching it from a psychological perspective. And that's why I even call it, boundary magic, is because, when we're setting these boundaries, we are manipulating the fabric of reality by changing ourselves, changing our own lives. And I would, before we go, I would like to say that people can find me on theunityprocess.com. And if you go to theunityprocess.com/sessions, you can fill out a contact form and get a hold of me. And it's important that it's so it's the Unity process, not just Unity process.
Yes, and again, I will add all web pages, links, etc., to the show notes so that everybody can get in contact with you and know where to find you and hear more about that. And I can also add that there is a fantastic universe of articles, blog posts on your website, and you also have quite some videos online. So there's so much to learn from you, and your articles, they're very, very interesting, and I've been reading over the last days quite some. So I can only recommend to all the listeners to check out your blog, your work, and learn more and get in touch with you.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you again from my side for having very much inspiring, insightful conversation. And I have a feeling there might be another conversation at some point in the future.
I'm open.
Okay, so that was an offer right now.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you very much, Nathan. Yeah. And speak soon.
Okay, great. Thanks.